Hey guys, in this episode we're going to conclude our interview with Armin Navabi from Atheist Republic. You can find parts 1 and 2 of this interview in the archive. Also, our intro music is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and our outro is Enthusiast by Tours. Both are available under Creative Commons license over at freemusicarchive.org. Now, without further ado, let's go back to the final part of the interview with Armin Navabi. So what's your background yourself? You said earlier, I think, that you came from Iran. That's right?
Yes. I was born in Tehran. During the Iran-Iraq War, I lived in Germany and England, but then we went back to Iran until the age, I think, 21, and then eventually I came back. I came to Vancouver. So I've been here for about 10 years now.
You're not old enough to remember the revolution, though. These would be your parents that would remember that.
Well, it's hard to remember it because I wasn't born yet. I was born about 4 years after the revolution.
Okay, so and then you were in Iran. Did you always question Islam, or were you pretty fervent in it at one point?
Okay, most people in Iran in my social circle didn't take Islam very seriously, and this is not true with all Iranians, but the area that a lot of middle to upper class people in Iran are not very religious, even though they call themselves Muslim. But when you go to other cities, maybe then the percentage of people that take Islam seriously will grow. When I'm saying other cities, I mean not the major cities. You have, if you go to Tehran or to Shiraz, you can see more liberal people. But if you go to Qom or Mashhad, and if you go to smaller cities or villages, then people are much more religious there. So and my family was very liberal, and both of them my father and mother were educated and liberal. That was my environment, but my school was still religious, even though my family wasn't. But at some point during I don't know if you want to go into the details about how that happened, but when I was about, I think, around 15, I became very religious, even though I scared the shit out of my parents.
Maybe it's sort of like a teenage rebellion. So rather than getting tattoos and body piercings, you decided to get really religious and freak out your parents.
That does happen in Iran, but my reasoning was different. Mine was, okay, so from a very young age, I always considered the teachings from school about God, hell, and heaven, because even the liberal people, even the people that weren't very religious in Iran, they accepted that there is a God, Muhammad is the last prophet, and heaven and hell exist. A lot of people are going to end up in hell. But for me, it was very strange that why most people around me didn't seem to care as much about this. Because for me, eternal torture, it was introduced to me as a real option. Given that was a real option, to me, it seemed like everybody's main priority, therefore, needs to be to stay out of there, right? If that was really the case. But in our social circles, most people, when we went to parties, people danced, people, boys and girls held hands and drank alcohol, and that they didn't pray. And yet we were told in school that, if you live like that, you will end up in hell. And when I ask other people, aren't you worried about going to hell? They would be like, I don't think God cares about what I'm eating or what I'm doing. God, do you really think the creator of the whole universe cares about what I do in my bedroom and stuff? That's the kind of stuff I heard. But then that wasn't very a good answer for me, because it seemed like they're just guessing. Even though they believe in hell, they're just going by a guess. Like, really, they didn't want to be sure about it. Like, they never even read the Quran, so how could they even know what God was? They all believe that this book, the Quran, is a direct communication from, written by the creator of the universe. The creator of the universe wrote this for you, to read, and nobody reads it. Like, if you really believe that this is the, a direct communication with this great being, why wouldn't you look at it? I mean, even when people were reading other books, a lot of people were reading so many different books, and many of them never read the Quran. And like, wouldn't you want to start with a book that its author is the creator of everything? It just boggled up my mind that how could people believe these things and not take it very seriously? And I really were scared about going to hell. I wanted to make sure that I don't end up there. It seemed to me a lot of people were worried about their education, about their careers, about their income, about not missing a party next week, but they weren't that worried about eternal torture, which they themselves claim that most people will end there. They just somehow were convinced that they're not going to end there. I'm not sure how, but so I wanted to make sure I didn't go there. I was also very worried about my parents not going there because they didn't pray, they didn't fast. So according to my, when I went to school, I asked my Islam teacher, so are my parents gonna burn in hell forever? And my teacher were like, yes, your parents are gonna burn in hell forever. So I was trying to save them. The thing is, in the way we were taught in school, is that according to Islam, or at least according to the Islam that they taught us in Iran, was that for boys there is no such thing as sin before age 15, and for girls that there's no such thing as sin before age 9. So, it's not like Christianity. In Christianity, you're born with original sin. You're already impure as soon as you're born. But for Islam, you are completely pure and sinless as a child.
Actually, in Catholicism, I was brought up Catholic, and they have baptism. So in Catholicism, you're actually baptized, and that removes the original sin. Then I believe you're good until they call it the age of accountability or something like that, which is, I think, in Catholicism, I think it's 12, something like that. So as long as you don't, so you could, I think the way it works is you could even go literally do anything you want. And they just say, well, it's a kid, so it doesn't count. But once you reach past the age of that age, you're now capable of doing mortal sins, which could put you into hell. And that's why also they try to get you confirmed by a certain age and get you, communion and the ability to confess.
Yeah.
So you can begin doing penance. And
Yeah.
it sounds similar to me.
Yeah, it sounds similar.
About.
It's very similar, except that in Islam they find it ridiculous that there is an original sin. That's what they say. Like, so you don't need baptism. There's no thing that you need to purify, because they say, how could a child sin? There's no need to wash anything away. So, but the concept is very similar. They say until the age of accountability, which for boys is 15 and for girls is 9, all your sins are forgiven, even without baptism, or even without anything. Like, even if you're born in a Jewish family or atheist family or a Christian family, if you die before that age, you will end up in heaven. So, to me, this seemed like a loophole in this game that nobody even asked me if I want to play. It seemed like this is a very high risk game that I was forced into playing. And the odds of losing are very high, and it just seemed like, I just felt like it's unfair. Like, somebody should have maybe not existing would have been preferable to the chances of dying, being tortured forever, right? But anyways, it seemed like non-existence was not an option. Even if you die, you still exist, apparently, according to their theology. But this seemed like a very easy way out, because even though suicide in Islam is, it will get you into hell because it's one of the top sins, right? The thing is that suicide before age 15 is not a sin because nothing before age 15 is a sin. So basically, all you had to do is commit suicide before age 15, and you end up in heaven. And to me, when I consider that, it seemed like it's such an obvious option and something that anybody on their right mind would take advantage of. Like, I ask myself, why would anybody stay around and risk going to hell where they could ensure eternal bliss by just quitting the game early, right? Why would I gamble, my soul, with such a high risk and such a high risk game? So basically, what I did was, around age 12, I think it was, I jumped out of my high school window.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I broke both my legs, my left hand, and I damaged my back, and I was in a wheelchair for 7 months. But I was unsuccessful, obviously. And the only reason why I didn't try it again was the effect that I saw it had on my parents. I saw my father crying for the first time. I saw my mom collapsing, in the hospital in front of everybody else, and that those images were very, it really was, damaging to me as a kid. They haunted me forever, and so that, and I was like ashamed that they didn't even consider what this would do to them. So I never tried suicide again, but so when I became 15, when I reached age 15, I realized that now I have to play this game. Now I have to make sure that I don't miss a single prayer. I don't look at girls. I don't think about girls. I fast during Ramadan. I read my Quran and follow, become observant Muslim. And, the not thinking about girls part proved to be more difficult than I assumed, especially when you're reaching that age, as a teenager.
Oh, 15's the worst possible age. I mean,
Yeah.
they could have even waited a few years and it would have been better.
Yes.
15, I remember when I was 15, and that was definitely the peak, I think, of.
It was the peak, and just imagine right at the peak where everybody's discovering this, their sexuality. Well, and
girls too around that age, right? I mean, that's just a crazy time to do it.
Yeah, and especially for me, for in Iran, boys schools and girls schools are separate, which makes the sight of seeing a girl even more, exciting. But the problem with my school was that the girls' school was right next to us, and every time we left school, I had to go through all these girls, and every time I go home, I had to go wash my head from all these impure thoughts. The thing is that it's impossible for a 15-year-old boy not to think about these things. At least it was impossible for me. And every time I feel so ashamed because I knew God could see in my head, right? And I felt like it's so, pathetic of me not to be able to do such an easy task that God is asking. Like, I felt like God is so humiliating because God has done so much for me, has given so much blessing and, created me. And I need to be so thankful, but I can't even not think about this disgusting thoughts that I thought disgusting. That now I know it wasn't disgusting, but at that point I was like, how could I have such embarrassing, disgusting thoughts? And the creator of the universe is just looking at in my head in disappointment, and I could just feel his disappointment of me. It's really damaging, honestly.
It's very damaging because like that. I had a similar situation with Catholicism where it was perhaps even creepier because every week I'd have to go into confession and the priest would ask all kinds of very intrusive questions about, so how many times did you touch yourself? That kind of thing, right? And and these days I'm thinking, was that priest having a good time listening to the answers? I don't know, right? So what that does is that basically perverts and sort of poisons a time that is probably, if you just get rid of all the hang-ups, is a great time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and imagine, okay, so I was a heterosexual male. Imagine the hard time, a lesbian or a gay man would be having, right? That they realize they will at some age they will start discovering that their feelings is actually for the same sex, and not only, at least I could think, one day I will marry this beautiful girl, and I will just, all these urges will be satisfied, But imagine that a gay man or a lesbian thinking, seeing other girls and noticing them, or seeing other boys and noticing them, and realizing that this is something that is so disgusting apparently, and is so deviant, and is so shameful, and is something that they should never do and could never even imagine. It's just, you just feel like so little of yourself. They are convinced that they are disgusting, that there's something wrong with them, and you're ashamed of yourself. Imagine how much you hate yourself for who you really are, right? It's just, and imagine how many people in the world right now are feeling that about themselves, about their own identity, and how many people are not with the person that they could love and cherish. How many relationships have been ruined right now because of this? How many people could be having fun right now and enjoying their sexuality and are not? How much pleasure is being missed in our world today because of these? It's not just about terrorism or people being beheaded. Those things exist, but if you add up all these other costs around the world, there's so much more harm and trauma and psychological, and poverty, and there's so much more harm to religion than suicide bombers that doesn't get media attention.
And a lot of that affects people for the rest of their lives. Have you noticed? Maybe this is something I've noticed. I don't know if it's the same in Islamic culture, but I've noticed in Christian culture how it seems like a lot of the religious people have hang-ups with homosexuality, but they usually mean two males. When it comes to lesbians, there seems to be almost a hierarchy of disgusting with them. So at the very top is two males. That's the most disgusting. And then, when I read some of these websites, even in the Middle East, the ones that are translated into English, it seems like the notion of two women together is almost invisible to them.
Well, even women having sexual pleasure seems to me too that is invisible to a lot of them. The way that we were thought. And the way it was presented to us, it seemed to us that woman is just providing the male with what the male deserves. So it's basically us. It's women don't even have sexual desires, or if they do, it's just so insignificant in relation to a male sexual desire, right? So this whole idea of women lusting is, forget just lesbians having lust over each other, just women in general having sexual desires was a foreign concept to us, when it seemed to a lot of us that when a woman is having sex with a man, she is doing him a favor, or when it's in a marriage, she's doing her duty. Basically, that's basically her purpose, her design to fulfill that desire, which is a lot of people, if they hear that from in the West, they feel like it's a disgusting way to look at women. But even me right now can't, when I put myself in that way of thinking, it seems so obviously wrong. But at that time, it seemed like, well, duh, men are sexual creatures and women are mostly not. And if you do find women that do have sexual desires, those are just disgusting women that are out.
Harlots or something, right?
Yes, yeah,
Just
I just
yeah.
yeah, like yeah, basically out of norm. A woman is not supposed to openly, um, show that she actually has sexual desires. A woman can fall in love, but not lust. It's just ridiculous. And
That could
that goes behind. That's the explanation when Muslims say why do women have to cover themselves and men don't have to do anything when it's just they say like because men are sexual creatures and women are not. And the way they tell us is that if women could see the thoughts in men's head, right, they wouldn't just cover themselves with hijab, they would cover themselves in iron suits. That's how they that's what they told us. But
the hilarious thing is that if you were to transplant some of these people to the West, could you imagine? I mean, how their heads must explode, even when they see some Western movies, for instance. Because I mean, I've spoken to women, and not only do they have a fairly good idea of what's going on in men's heads, but you should check out what's going on in some women's heads as well. I mean, it goes both ways.
yeah, of course. I mean, this is obvious to us now. I mean, I don't even, when I say these things, I don't even feel like arguing against them because it's so obvious to most of us that I don't think it even deserves. It does deserve a response when I'm talking to people that believe that, but I think like probably your audience doesn't even need to be explained these things. I mean, it's obvious that women can enjoy sex as much as men do, and there are a lot of men that don't have any sexual desires, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Everybody just has to discover themselves and what they like and who they are, instead of just trying to see what category they belong to and try to fit that category, right? Everybody is there are women that there are women that have no sexual desires, and that's fine, and there are women that have a lot of sexual, much greater sexual desire than average people, and that's great. They get to have more fun, and men too. Men shouldn't feel ashamed that if a man has feels more urges than an average man, there's nothing wrong with that. And if sometimes men feel, some people are asexual, and they sometimes they feel like they're meant they're made to feel like they're missing out. It's not. People get to spend their time on things that they enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying something as long as you're not harming anybody. I mean, that's obvious. I don't even know why we need to explain that to people, because it seems so obvious.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely. I just wonder about what the marriage situation must be. I mean, I guess the marriage in these cultures must be something very sort of foreign. Maybe if you were to take North America and maybe flip us back 60 years, it might be there might be some parallels there.
Well, I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but one thing is that the U.S. entertainment industry infiltrates everywhere, right? Even people that hate United States and U.S. culture, a lot of them, they just can't get enough of U.S. movie and U.S. entertainment, right? So movies and TV series, they go everywhere. They are watched everywhere around the world, from Korea to to Iran, to Egypt, to in Saudi Arabia. People watch these things. I mean, there are people that think that you shouldn't watch them and they don't watch them, but at least through these, when I lived in Iran, the way when I came to to Canada, and when I visited United States, I was actually surprised to learn that United States was actually a little bit more religious than I assumed, because my sense, the image that I got from movies and TV series, was a much more liberal United States than what it actually was, right? So this whole idea of the liberal way and the free way and the way and how gay rights are accepted in the United States or in countries like in European countries or Canada is not completely foreign to um, to people in the Middle East or other or Indonesia or Bangladesh or Pakistan. It's not foreign to them. It's just, but watching it on TV and seeing somebody live it is completely different. You might watch a lot of traditional Japanese movies and get some understanding of some tradition, but if you see it in person, it might give you much. You might watch it with much more amazement than when you're watching it on TV, even though it's not 100% foreign to you, right? So sometimes when a lot of Muslims come to Western countries, you do notice that when they go see a gay pride parade, they still do feel a little bit shocked about how is this so celebrated openly out in the open, even among people that knew that this was a thing, even if they heard about gay pride parades and they knew this was a thing and it was accepted. When they come and see it in real life, they still get, well, like, it's a little bit shocking that how could this be so openly accepted. I mean, even for me, when I came to Canada, the idea, I knew this for forever, that in Canada, in the United States, or in Europe, you could say things against the government and you're not going to get in trouble for it, right? This was something that I already knew. But when I came to Canada, I just felt, and I visited a lot of countries, but I always knew I had to go back to Iran. But when I eventually moved, I felt like I can say anything I want now and nothing is going to happen to me. That just seemed so unreal that I could get away with saying anything. I could openly go to, I could buy some fruits and tell the store owner, like, hey, I don't believe in God. And the guy is going to be like, okay. And nothing is going to happen to me. Like, that just seemed like I could just say that to people and it's okay. So, it was still shocking a little bit that was so easy to do here.
So your book's called Why Is There No God? Simple Responses to 20 Common Arguments for the Existence of God.
Yeah, why there is no God.
Right. Why? Did I say why there is a God?
No, you said why is there no God. But it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's okay. I sometimes get the subtitle wrong myself. So why there is no God? Simple responses to 20 common arguments for the existence of God. And this is supposed to be a simple introduction for people that are just wanted to get introduced to the concept of why some people might not believe in God and what are some rebuttals to the most common arguments that I hear theists bring up. I basically took the 20 arguments that you keep on seeing people make in support of God, and basically came up with simple rebuttals to them. But I also at the end of there's 20 chapters, and each chapter basically examines one of these arguments and why they are wrong. But at the end of each chapter, I also provide resources for anybody that wants to get into more detail to read more on them. But a lot of people I found a lot of people didn't want to get into too much detailed philosophy, or a lot of people didn't want, don't have time to, go into the arguments they just want to get a quick, easy to read, easy to understand, to the point, without fluff, arguments to see why some people don't believe in God. And this is not just for atheists, this is also for religious people, even religious people that would not change their minds if they just want to see what are the arguments atheists have against their arguments for God. This is a good summary. A lot of people that have never read anything on this subject told me that they found it very helpful. But also a lot of people that I was surprised because I never wanted to give this book to people that have read a lot about atheism or philosophy, because I felt like this is going to be too simple for them. to be, it's going to be, so, because it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for people that were just getting introduced to it. But a lot of people that did have a little background also read it, and they felt like it was a really good summary, and some of them felt like it was a good, way to refresh them, their memory of how you refute some of these arguments. So I do get a lot of feedback on it, some of positive, some of negative. And if anybody from your audience reads it, I would be very interested in their feedback on it. One of the main negative feedbacks that I get on it is that it's too simple, but I don't understand that feedback, because it says on the title simple responses. So to the 20. So it's been very transparent that this is supposed to be simple responses to 20 common arguments. So the idea that it's too simple is by design. It was supposed to be too simple. It's an introduction to the subject.
I find that a lot of people out there on discussion boards are really into the complicated arguments. And, when it comes to everyday transactions with someone, though, just on the streets, you're not going to, be whipping out any kind of really complicated responses anyway. I find a lot of these interactions on the bus or that kind of thing.
That's a very good point, because even a lot of people that do are very smart and do argue these points very well, they don't know how to bring these points to people without any background in philosophy. And this actually helps some of them to come up with a more simplified version of explaining these things, right? The idea of why the belief in God makes no sense is not actually as complicated as as a lot of people make it seem to be. The idea that you just don't withhold belief until you have evidence for something, it's a very simple concept. And if you could explain that with examples, with stories to people, you could find a way to communicate this with a lot of people that don't have the educational background or that don't have much experience with debating these things. And a lot of atheists always think everybody should be educated and everybody should just read a lot of the science books, philosophy books. A lot of people just don't have the time, and then they are trying to you need to spend time with your family. You need to provide for them. A lot of people can't even find 5 minutes for their own in the day today. So it's very important, I think, to provide. The more complicated books are good too, and they need to be there. But we also have to provide resources for people that don't have the time and might not have the background. It's good to be respectful of your readers' time. You don't want to waste their time by providing anything that they could have, you feel that they could have done without. When I wrote this book, I kept on reading it over and over again, and I kept on trying to find anything that I could cut out. Would this still be as simple as it is without? Can I save my reader some time if I take this part out? Is this essential to be here? Does it really, really help with making this argument become more clear, or could I do without it? So that's why it ended up being a very short book. So, and also there's an audio version of it out there. I think you could finish the audio. The audiobook is only like two or 3 hours. I like audiobooks and podcasts. I listen to them when I'm working out or driving. They're fun.